people are in therapy for years, if not decades, and I was thinking, are you making progress, the kind that you want? If you've gone through really traumatic things in your life, it can take a really long time to undo that damage.
I still was figuring out my own process, my own experience. I really think that it's part of the human experience overall, and if we can walk ourselves through this, anyone listening to this can do the work themselves.
Because emotions are a record of our past experiences, if you can't think greater than how you feel, this thinking-feeling loop keeps you anchored to your past and creates a constant state of being.
We're really crappy time travelers. Imagine having a time travel machine, but you don't get to control it, and it takes you back to all the crappy experiences you didn't like. That's how we've trained our minds, a lot of us. And we willingly let our minds take us to the past. I will share a very practical way of how I had to change my state to tell people this stuff works. If we can change...
Melanie?
Yes?
What do you want to talk about?
I would actually really like to talk about this notion of that I've been seeing a lot this year in my coaching is that I don't think people understand how important and vital it is to be able to emotionally regulate yourself to really get to the places you want to go or to have the experiences you want to have. So emotional regulation is something I've noticed just people are not like, oh, sign me up. It's like, yeah, it's, you know, it's something a lot of people learn in therapy. And I think a lot of people are more open now to therapy. But what I just realized this year while I was doing the coaching is that people come to me for the communication piece. They're like, yeah, I want to learn how to be a better communicator. But then what they don't realize is really what needs to quote unquote be fixed is the story that they have about X, Y, and Z in their mind. So it's all about your thought creates then emotion. So the story you have in your head, the thought you're having creates the emotion. And that is the very emotion that's going to dictate your behavior. And guess what? Your behaviors that are repeated are going to create your life. And so it's been such a small, tiny little formula that I've just been honing in on with my coaching clients and, you know, different workshops and what have you. And it's so simple, but it's finally simple enough for I think people to understand. Because I think before the way I was doing it was too many steps for people. It was too much. So I just realized that a lot of us struggle with emotional regulation and we project that job onto the other person. Like, Chris, I want you to make me feel better. I want you to believe in me. I want you to whatever, fill in the blank. We just pass that on. So it's just something I've been seeing a lot of. And with all the uncertainty in the world right now, I think people are struggling.
Okay. I noticed that you almost combined two words. So I'll just do it for you. We strugulate.
We strugulate.
To manage.
Is that a new word we're going to use?
Maybe strugulate. Let's do this. Now, for people who don't know who you are, Melanie, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit of your backstory?
Yes. So my name is Melanie Whitney. So what I do for work, I essentially teach people how to mindfully communicate and regulate their emotions. But my background, I never in a million years thought I'd be doing this for work. This is like so opposite of what I thought I would be doing. I grew up in Southern California. My parents are first gen here. So grew up very Mexican American. And the big thing that drove most of my life and my adolescence was go to school, get an education, get a safe job. And so that was deeply grounded in me. And so from kindergarten, I was like an overachiever, the poster child kid, good at school, made friends, great at sports, and that was it. That was the track. And it was that all the way until college and then my master's program. So I just, in my mind, if I finished my education and I did all the things and I checked all the boxes, I was going to be solid in life. And then that proved to not be true. I graduated, couldn't get a job, couldn't pay my student loans. And I actually ended up I was unemployed for like 6 to 8 months, which is like forever when you have bills to pay and things like that. And so there I was like, in my early 20s. Now I look back, I'm like, I was a baby. But at that time I was like, I have my master's degree. I should be doing this by now. I should be doing this, this, and this. So anyway, life had different things in store. I went into marketing and event planning, which I thought that's what I wanted to do. And that was my mission. I was very detail oriented, type A, perfectionist. And when I went into that path, it was good for about almost a year. And then I got laid off right after I bought a brand new car.
Oh, snap.
And I almost signed a lease on an apartment in LA, and thank God I didn't. I think I got fired, not fired, let go. They were downsizing like 2 days before I signed the lease. So that was a blessing. But I ended up living back with my parents in my childhood bedroom, in my twin size bed. And that was like the first rock bottom that I had.
Okay.
I was like, what am I doing with my life? And so that was the first time I was introduced to mindfulness, because I needed to pick myself up out of the dark, out of the floor. And I picked up a book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And that was my first introduction to mindfulness, but I still was not ready for that deep dive. And so I ended up becoming a professor and being super academic still and doing all the things. And again, bunch of different life events happened. And ultimately, I just realized how limited I was living in the education space, because, it's very bureaucratic. You have to follow these rules and do these things. And then one time I saw a flyer for a TEDx talk. And it had always been like a little secret dream of mine to do that I never told anybody. And I was like, I'm just going to apply. I probably won't even get it. And then I got it. And I was like, oh shit, now I need to come up with a talk for this. And then I just did the TED Talk on my experience. And that one TED Talk ended up leading to another workshop and another workshop. And that's kind of the short version of how I got here, was really healing myself through that whole process.
I just want to sit in that for a minute.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I want to go back in time a little bit to try and understand you.
Let's
so
do
you're,
it. Let's
you're
time
Mexican
travel.
American, first generation American?
My parents are first gen. They were born here. I'm second.
Okay, you're second. Yeah. How is it that you have the name Whitney?
My dad's part white. That's why. That's where it comes from. That's why he's like a sliver white. And that's where the name comes from. And it's sad because we actually don't know too much of his ancestry, because he had an absent father.
Okay.
So we learned what we know is through like, what's that called? Ancestry. He did his ancestry. And so we know a little bit, but not too much.
So what kind of white is he?
We think it's like, from the map, according to the map, it's like right by Ireland and Scotland right there.
Mm-hmm. So somewhere in there was a Scottish, Irish white man who impregnated a Latina.
It seems that way. Right? Yes.
Because you're just a sliver of white, but then disappeared out of the story.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I just wanted to understand that part. Okay. So you're very academic minded. You do well in school. You're unlike me. I'm first generation immigrant. I'm supposed to do well. I'm like, I don't know about this.
You're anti?
Well, not anti. It's just like the pressure to do well in school, as many immigrant children will tell you, is very real. And luckily, I had an older brother who would shield me from most of that pressure to do well. Oh,
so you're middle child.
I'm a mother freaking middle child. There we go. The truth is out. I have middle child syndrome, and we can
the
talk about it later.
Forgotten child.
The forgotten child. Yes. You know, the middle child disappeared.
What do you mean?
That's a phenomenon. Because people are not having 3 kids now. They might have 1. They might have 2. So there's no more middle child.
Oh my gosh.
There's a whole article on this if you want to look it up. Yeah,
well, I empathize because I am a middle child, but technically I have an older sibling, but we're like 12 years apart. So I also grew up very much like the eldest child once she left. Yeah. So I have both.
Okay.
So anyway, you were saying you got shielded from that.
Well, and apparently you weren't, because 12 years is a good time to forget. And then all the pressure's back on you again to do well.
Yeah.
And so you excel in school, and you get you go to get a degree, and then you get a master's degree. Where'd you go to school and what did you study?
So I went to Cal State Long Beach, and I studied communication, interpersonal communication specifically.
Okay. Pretty broad.
Yes.
Okay. And then where'd you get your master's degree?
Also at Cal State Long Beach.
You can't leave, huh?
I couldn't leave. It was like a freaking vortex.
Okay. Here's another question. I kind of already know the answer, I think. And where do you teach?
Cal State Long Beach.
No, surprise!
Chris, I tried to freaking leave. I tried.
You didn't try hard enough. Oh my gosh. You're a homebody.
Well, this is what's crazy.
Yes.
Is the biggest decision in me staying there for my master's was a financial decision. Like, I couldn't afford to go out of state. That was a big thing. And I was like, I couldn't fathom how, because I put myself through college.
Okay.
I worked like 3 different jobs. It was a nightmare. It was a lot. I don't know how he did it, to be honest, but I figured, okay, if I stay here, if I stay local, I could live in my parents' house. I could do this. This was a very calculated decision. And I never planned on working there.
Wink, wink. Sure you didn't. We'll see. We'll see. Detective Doe's on the case, everybody. So relax.
Awesome.
We're going to get to this and we're going to dig out all the juicy details. Okay. So your parents didn't have an education fund for you. No. And I do want to say this. There's lots of problems with the American education system, but one shining star in it is state schools. They're actually really good. They're affordable. And let's talk a little bit about that. So if you were to go to like a UC school, the tuition would be radically different, right? Versus a Cal State school. Do you remember how much you paid in tuition per semester there? Ooh, roughly?
I want to say, this could be totally wrong.
It's okay.
I want to say like 1,800.
Okay. And what
which
year
sounds
is
like nothing.
It's nothing.
I started at Cal State Long Beach in 2007. I was a transfer student. I went to community college first.
Okay. Like a good person should get all your gen ed stuff out, right?
Exactly.
All right. 2007, 1,800. So here's a point of reference, everybody, because you're like, well, what's the difference here? I went to Art Center in the early 90s. Tuition then was $3,400 when I started and wound up being, I think, almost $6,000 by the time I finished. This is a private art school, and you can see now quite the difference there. So adjusted for inflation and rising tuition costs, I don't know what it was like in 2007, but I can tell you what it is now. Let's do a comparison now.
Oh, no.
To go to art school, because I'm paying for a child to go to art school, it is $25,000 a semester.
A semester?
A semester. Do you know what the tuition is today to go to Cal State?
About $3,700 a semester.
A seventh of the cost to go to a private art school. So there's a lot of problems that we have. We live in a great place with great weather. I'm looking outside. It's beautiful. It's sunshine. And I think it's like 72 degrees, maybe 73. It's beautiful. And it's like this for most of the year. But $3,700 a semester is a bargain. It is a steal. And I love that. Okay, so certain things are working. I want to give credit where credit is due. But you said you had to work 3 different jobs to put yourself through school while living at home. So you have no rent. You have no food costs, I assume. You might have to pay for your car or something like that. Or maybe your parents got you a car, a beater, something like that. You're able to get to school. What were you doing in your jobs? I mean, it's like, I can't believe it. Tuition.
Mind you, the freaking like...
Don't mind me, mind you.
Mind you, the minimum wage was like what, like $8 maybe or something like that. Yeah. I was paying for my own bills essentially. So like my phone bill I paid, I did buy my own like groceries in the house, my car insurance, textbooks were insane.
This is me rolling my eyes. Go on.
Roll your eyes. It was part-time work ultimately because I still needed to go to school. So it never felt, and like going out and having fun with friends. But I mean, it's chump change really when you think about it. Like it wasn't a lot, but it felt like I was working so hard for so little.
And what kind of jobs did you have?
I worked in retail. I worked as a server. Oh my God, I'll never do that
Where
again.
I want some specifics.
You want
here.
some details.
I'm going to look up here.
He's going to...
I'm going to verify your work record here.
I actually worked at Lucille's in Long Beach on 2nd Street, but it's not there anymore.
That's fine. That's the retail place?
No, that was the barbecue restaurant place. I was a server there.
You're a server. Yeah. Okay. What about retail?
Oh my God, I had quite a few different jobs. It was this old, I can't remember the name of it. They sold like college like sweaters and shirts and stuff. It was at
a campus store?
Like what?
The campus store, something like that?
It wasn't a campus store. It was just like a regular store, but it had all like nationwide different like college campuses and stuff. Okay. Yeah, it was at the Block, which is now the Outlets in Orange. Okay. But yeah, I had a couple jobs there. A surf shop I once worked at. Like random.
Whatever, if somebody would hire you, I'm your girl.
Yeah, right? Done. Right. Cashier.
Okay. So you go through, you finish getting your degree, and what compels you to go get a master's degree?
You know, what compelled me was I figured one day I'm going to want to retire and teach because I did love school. And I figured, that'll be my backup plan. Yeah. So let's just knock it out now. It'll be easier. Everything's fresh. Let's do it.
So you roll right into the master's program?
Right in. Yep.
Okay.
No gap.
And is this now the same major, communication?
Yep.
Wow. So you
Yep.
doubled down on that dog.
I did double down. And, it was really about time. I was in a hurry. I was like, how can I get out of here fastest?
Wow.
Because
Okay.
again, I thought I was chasing a pot of gold.
What gold were you chasing?
Success, Chris. Success.
But like through communications?
But because I was going to go into
that's a weird
PR,
plan.
marketing, right?
Okay.
Event planning. I had known people that were doing it and they were living
Why
this
didn't you
cool
study
life.
advertising then or marketing versus communication?
I was going to minor in marketing, but it would have costed me another semester. And I was like, not that important.
You can't afford another $1,800.
Like, no, thank you. It was more about the time. It was more about the time than the money. Because I was pulling out student loans at that time.
Okay.
And so I was like, forget it. I was like, no, time.
Let's put this in perspective, everybody. And you're going to roll your eyes at me, and I'm okay if you do, everybody. $1,800 is like my jacket shopping budget here. So Melanie won't get her minor.
Excuse me, you gotta rewind the cost of living back then. You can't.
It's not that long ago. It's not that long ago. It's not like in the 70s, all right? So I'm like, damn, okay. Like right now, I'm like, I can't wait for the jacket to go on sale so I can buy it.
So you can buy it.
You're like, I'm not going to get a whole nother degree.
I was a poor little college student.
I don't know.
And I was racing. Honestly, it was the time. That's what I was really racing against. Because I was like, whatever, these are going to be payments I make anyway.
Okay,
right?
well,
but it was time. That. Yeah. Okay. I was very impatient.
I need to say this because my son's in college right now and he's going to Columbia and he's studying philosophy and writing and he's just trying to finish school. I'm like, you're supposed to enjoy this part. This is going to be the foundation for where you're going to go. What is the point to finish school? Because as it has worked out with your master's degree, with your fancy master's degree, you couldn't get a job for 6 to 8 months.
No, you know what people would tell me? I was overqualified.
Yeah. That's a fancy way of saying you're really smart, but you have no skills. Just going to put that out there, everybody. And we're afraid that you're going to want more money than what we can pay you to do this very low thing.
That or you're going to leave too soon.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of reasons why they could say that.
Yeah.
And so here's the funny thing. Even with your master's degree, you wind up doing something quite different, event planning and marketing, which isn't under, I think, the communications major.
It is technically.
It is? Right,
yeah. So the way at Cal State, I mean, this is the thing, like every Cal State like umbrellas communication differently. For us, we had 3 tracks. So it was either you could go PR, like that route, interpersonal or organizational. And ultimately my, my advisor was like, look, stick the track. You already have these classes. Stick with organizational, interpersonal. You can still go into PR. I'll hook you up with these internships. You'll be fine. And so I was like, all right.
Yeah, because if I were advising a 17 or 18-year-old kid right now, and you want to get into marketing and event planning, I would just say, go get an internship somewhere and just work like a dog and work your way up and learn the trade. You're going to go much faster, much farther than you would if you were to spend 6 years or whatever you're going to get to a degree.
Mm-hmm. And then, and mind you, like the system is so, it conditions kids to really think like you just, it's a checklist. Like you already have these classes, so stay here. Don't waste your time. Don't do this. Don't do that. And like your son is just trying to, like you said, burn through because he just wants the piece of paper. So it's like, I have the piece of paper. Now I want to go do these things.
So eventually you wind up teaching back at the school, your alma mater, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're a full-time professor?
Now, yeah.
Now. And what do you do on the side?
I teach mindful communication to professionals, to high-performing professionals. So I basically get to teach what I'm kind of teaching. In the school, they don't really permit me to get too much into the mindfulness aspect. There's a little bit of it because more research and empirical research is coming out, but my hands are kind of tied. I'm playing, within their parameters. But my wife, who's very much business oriented, was like, why don't you just start your own consulting business? Like screw the system. They're not paying you well anyway. Screw the system. So
you have your school hours and then you do mindfulness, communication, coaching, consulting in the private sector, if you will.
Correct.
Okay. And in your workload, how does that balance out? Like what percentage is in your academic school life versus in your private practice?
It's really tough, to be honest. When I'm in session, especially in the beginning, it wasn't as bad because business was kind of slow, to be honest. And I was figuring it out and it was I really made the shift to go hard on my business was right before the pandemic, and then the pandemic happened. And so all this shifting, right? Learning content. And then now I'm a content creator and now I have to learn this and this. So now that things are kind of rolling, it's very difficult. I have to be so on my time management because my commitment at the school, luckily, is only 2 days a week. I physically go 2 days a week. But as you know, with teaching, there's grading, there's emails, there's handling students, there's all of that. And then I need to also, I'm a solopreneur. So I also have all these things that I'm juggling. And I find that in the beginning, I was throwing spaghetti at the wall, figuring out like, as far as my business, like, I'm going to try this, and I'm going to try that, and I'm going to try that. And I think that's the biggest mistake I was making, is not deciding what's where. And this is a phrase that I've learned from people who are in sales, are like, what's closest to the money? Put your time and energy there. And then once you build a system and you get in a pattern, it will be a lot easier. And so the workload is tough. I go to school all day, Mondays and Wednesdays. I'm there from 8 to 5. I come home. I do a little bit stuff for my business. Then I have a wife and a dog I have to pay attention to to go, handle that. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm all in my office working on my business. And then Fridays is a day where I kind of create content, plan things like that. And I don't really have weekends, but I'm okay with that because I'm doing something that I truly love. And I've realized I never would have called myself a creative, but after being part of the Future Pro group and seeing how different that word can mean to so many different people, and it just really truly means to create, I notice that when I'm not creating, I feel like this angst in my body, like something needs to come out. And so my Friday, Saturday, Sundays are the creating, and often it's writing, or it's building a workshop, or writing some script for something that I'm working on. And it's never, I think in the beginning I was trying to achieve this perfect balance. And what I've had to surrender to is that it's really about me being able to prioritize what's important this week.
Okay. You didn't answer my question.
You said, what was the balance?
What's the breakdown between these two things? You gave me.
What do you mean breakdown? What's
40%, 60%, that kind of.
That's what you want? Do you want percentages? It's different every week.
You're like,
it's different
and then I wake up and have coffee. What's the
Because
percentage for each? Roughly. And I'm not managing your timesheet. It's okay.
No, honestly, it feels very like let's say this last week was heavy on school.
Yeah, you know what though? But if you just zoomed out and looked at the last couple of years, you have an answer. I'm just, for people to understand what it's like to run basically to work a full-time gig at a school and to run an independent business, what it's going to take.
It's going to take everything.
Yeah, but percentage-wise.
I really feel like half the, like when I'm, here's your answer. When I'm in session at school, when school's on, that's probably taking more of my time. Roughly, let's say 60-40.
Okay.
And then when I'm out, like in the summer, oh my God, I can put everything towards my business, which is amazing. And then I have to plan for, okay, August is coming, semester's coming. Yeah. How am I going? What can I put on autopilot? What needs my time and attention?
Right. So the beautiful thing about teaching at a school, that you get summers off. So you have a 3-month break-ish. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And you have longer holidays. You have spring break.
Totally.
And you have long winter breaks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
I count down every time.
There. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. Now, we need to move to the thing that we want to talk about.
Let's move to
which is this idea of mindful communication. It seems like really lofty. Like you try to put your hand around it, it's like a cloud of vapor. And you're like, what the heck is that? Now, you have a lot in common with my wife, that there's a deep sense of spirituality. There's what I always tell people, I'm really logical, so I get secondhand woo. That's what's happening here. But what does it even mean, mindful communication?
So it's relatively newer in the communication space, but if I was to just be very simple and pragmatic about it, mindful communication means your ability to communicate in the present moment. So you're operating from here, not some story in the past, not some story in the future. So speaking from the present moment without judgment and without attachment, because that's really mindfulness, is the ability to be present, observing your surroundings without judgment and being detached from any specific outcome. So bringing those 3 principles into the way you communicate, and not just communicate with others, but communicate with yourself. That's what mindful communication is.
Who needs this?
Oh God, everybody. We all need it. People suck at this, Chris. You know how judgmental
And you're looking
we
at
are?
me right now.
I'm looking at you. I am. You know, if we're going to be, because you and I are very straight up with each other.
Let's do it.
So when I first met you on
Yes.
Clubhouse,
Okay.
I don't know what this is, 2020, 2021,
Something like that.
your communication has changed since that until now.
Yeah.
Dramatically. I've noticed it. You
How
were a
so?
little bit more, what would you call yourself? A charming razor blade?
Yes.
You were a lot more, I would listen, because that's my superpower. I'm listening to people and hearing and breaking down their communication. I've noticed that now you speak with a lot more presence, meaning here now. When people ask, because God, people ask you questions all the time, and a lot of them are the same questions, right? You're very patient for the most part. And I just find that you're a lot more compassionate now as a teacher. Am I wrong? Have you been doing some work in the past couple of years that we don't know about?
I don't think so. I haven't done any work.
When did you start going to therapy?
Long before that. Yes.
Okay. So what do you think has changed the most with you in the past 3-4 years? Your leadership style?
I don't know. I don't think much has changed, to be honest. I think there's some other phenomenon that's going on right now.
Ooh, please do tell.
Yeah. So for the record, I think I saw my therapist, a family therapist, for a total of 10 sessions in the span of less than a year.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
I didn't have any more problems with her. She was just so good at solving problems. And I'm a very good student. So
That's
when I hear the
awesome.
lesson, I'm done. Let's go. What's the next one? And so I ran out of things to talk to her about, which is one of my big regrets in life because she's since retired. She was older when I met her. And so, of course, I try to reach out to her and she's long gone, right? Not from the earth, but just not doing it.
From this, from her occupation.
And I would say that was probably 2007, 2006.
Oh, wow.
It was a long time ago.
That's awesome.
And then I've been coach free for a long time. My mentor, my coach, my business coach, Keir McLaren, and I stopped working together right around the time of the Futur. So that's 2014. So from that point forward to 2020, so it's been 6, 7, 8, 10 years since I've talked to a therapist. And I think the phenomenon that's going on here is, I'm put this back on you.
Okay.
Here's how I go like this.
Okay. I'm into it. I'm into it. Let's dance.
Is initially when somebody comes upon a piece of content or drops into one of my rooms, it's like a shock, like in terms of like cold water or electricity, and they're not used to this. Who's this Asian man who's like super direct, brusque, and just really just incisive in the comments that I'm making, really thrifty with my words, but just trying to find the problem really quickly. And people will take it as arrogant, as aggressive, as violent communication until they get past the first couple layers. Once they get beyond that, they're like, oh, there's a warm, compassionate human being there who genuinely cares about people, who's doing this for what I believe is to be the right reasons and not the wrong reasons. Because you keep thinking, there's a funnel coming, there's a enroll in this webinar and blah, blah, blah. And it just doesn't come in the way they think because it's so different. And I think it's your familiarity with me that has changed how you remember it. That would be my theory.
Fair theory. Totally. And, I just, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Familiarity, right? There's layers to people. Yeah. I think that's what I appreciated about you the most is you're very direct and authentic. You're like, I'm not going to blow smoke just to blow smoke. Like, you ask for help, I'm going to give you my advice, right? And I really appreciate that about you. And I think that's what a lot of people appreciate about you. I just, and again, this could totally be my own delusion, but just over the, years being in the Futur Pro group, it just seems like you've been so much more like sharing more or just more authentic or more, not more authentic because you were authentic before, but I think revealing more, maybe more vulnerability, more of that. And maybe that's
hop to that. We can talk about that. Yeah. What you're seeing is, I think where a lot of us come from, which is I'm showing up to teach. Nobody wants to know about anything about me. I'm not here to like tell you all about my personal life because you don't care. That's the story I tell myself. You were talking about your thoughts or the story that you tell yourself, and then they govern your feelings and your actions and all that kind of stuff. I just think nobody needs to hear this. But if you watch some of the earliest videos when I used to have students from Otis or Art Center come by my studio and we would film those sessions, they would ask me like, how'd you get started? What did you struggle with? And I would tell them, it's just those videos don't go viral and nobody's going into the archive. So people would say, oh, you've never shared this before. I'm like, actually, I have video proof that I have, and the story's been there. It's just no one wants to know it. The interesting thing is, I think when students come to your studio, they know you as a professor, they know your body of work. So of course they're going to ask for more personal things, because for them, that would be potentially some kind of unlock or insight into the thinking that made this person, that made this work. So that's what they're looking for. But if you're just bumping into our content as the social feed, the algorithm sends you something, that may not be your first question. And so it takes them time to like want to know that. And this is what I preach to people. When you're making content initially, unless you're really about healing from trauma and dealing with your emotional wounds, the mother wound, all that kind of stuff, you may not just want to lead with that. You need to show up for people before they show up for you. Show me you care so I can care about you. And I do care a lot about people. My entire thesis for the future is to help people achieve their dreams, because I think the world is a much better place when each of one of us is working in our zone of genius, fulfilling our highest desires and passions, and doing purposeful, meaningful work. And if we could do that, I think there's going to be less violence in every definition of that word. And that's what I'm really here for. So that's what I'm putting out there. So as more people get to know you through your work, they become naturally more curious about who is this person. And I don't think you've ever encountered me, this is a bold statement, where you've asked me a deeply personal question and I've shied away from it.
No, you usually answer.
Have I ever not answered?
No.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I even tell people.
Maybe my questions need to get more deep. No, I'm just kidding.
They can. And I encourage people to. Really,
you do. I've seen you tell people like, ask me anything.
Yeah, whatever you want to know. If you're brave enough to ask it, I will do my best to answer it. And I think only on one occasion, somebody asked me a question, which I wasn't comfortable answering. And the reason wasn't so much that I didn't want to answer. It was because they're fishing for gossip. And then I'm like, since you're not involved in this story, I don't feel compelled to tell you this. And I just don't know how it's going to help anybody right now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I like gossip as much as the next person, but you got to be in it. You got to be in there with me.
You got to be involved.
You got to be involved. You got to be part of it. If you weren't there, it doesn't feel right for me to talk about.
No, I love that. And I think what's so cool about, being in the Future Pro group and being in this space that you facilitate in is seeing, and this might just be a me thing, but I think humans are so fascinating, and that we all think we're so different. We think like, oh, but my problem's different in my business, Chris. Yeah. Like mine's different. And you're always
I like the different voices that you have there.
Thank
really,
you.
I'm liking. I like the side of you. Keep going.
And I've just continuously watched you and I'm going to compare it to what I do. Yeah. I'm like, God, I've seen people from all these different fields and all these different ages and different backgrounds asking the same question, and it's the same freaking answer. It's the same thing. And I'm like, so this is so interesting. Do we all just want to feel like we're special or unique, or are they trying to maybe connect with you in a certain, different way? They're desiring a different connection with you. And so what it got me thinking of so I've had a lot of different jobs, and there was one job I had in public health where I was a tobacco cessation counselor. I'd help people quit smoking, and I would go into rehab homes, jails, like detention facilities, like all sorts of places. I've worked in really nice places. Like I've worked with all different types of people, but working in that specific sector where people are really looking at these folks who have been incarcerated or drug addicts very negatively. But when I would sit there and listen to them, I'm like, man, we all have the same problems. We all feel like we're not good enough. We're scared to be rejected. We have fear of abandonment. Like we're scared to be vulnerable. And I'm like, it's wild. So I've just noticed that, like when we were when we went to the fishing trip, in Canada, and seeing you engage with all different types of people, like even people outside of our group, when people would approach you on the street. And it was like, we're all the same. We're all the same. And I think that if we can really, there's an unlock that happens when you, I guess, I don't know, maybe that requires us minimizing our ego to see that we're much more similar than we are different. But I really feel like it opens us up in ways where we can be pursuing our passions. We can be creating things that we thought we only could dream of. And there's a lot of healing, I think, that needs to take place, and a lot of ego check that needs to take place first.
There is this thing that we all think we're so unique and different, that our business, our family story, our birth order makes it so complicated. There's a tendency to want to create something that was, I think, to make something that's very simple and clear, unclear. And it's that kind of fogginess of the mind that we don't have to be accountable for a whole lot. And I'm a person about radical accountability, to take responsibility for things. When we make a decision to go on a trip or not go on a trip, it's very uncomfortable because we keep thinking about the other decision that we didn't make, the opportunity cost. If I do this, what am I saying no to?
Yeah.
And in that state, it allows us, or gives us the opportunity to say, well, it's not clear what I should do, so I'll do nothing, or I'll just move very slowly through life. And I think that's the challenge there. And you're absolutely right. I'm 100% in alignment with you here. A business problem is a business problem. I don't care if you bake cakes or you walk dogs. You still have the same problems: marketing, sales, customer service, delivery of product, and making sure everyone has a beautiful customer experience. And it doesn't really matter. It's just done at different scales, speak to different audiences and different language and tools, but the core principles are the same. This is why I can answer questions that I'm not prepared to answer, because you see patterns. It's the same problem over and over again.
Yes.
And people keep insisting, no, you need to hear my whole story. And there is something to that, right?
Of course.
If we're in a social circle and we're out by the campfire and there's 10 of us, I do want to know your story. I want to know how you got here, not here in this moment, but how you got here.
Yeah.
Because then I really understand and appreciate you on a different level. But when it comes to coaching or learning or doing something, I'll listen to that. You just have to pay for it. But at the end of the day, the answer will be exactly the same. So I'm, being a first generation immigrant, I'm not even born here. I'm thrifty.
Mm-hmm.
That's a nice way to say I'm cheap. Meaning I don't want to spend money on things that aren't necessary, because I'd rather use that money to do something else. So if I don't have to tell you all the background and the context, and you can just give me the answer and I can change my life, that's what I want. That's why I only saw Joan for 10 times, because it was that good. I'm like, I don't know what else to do.
Well, and I think what you're speaking to, though, requires a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of us struggle with that self-awareness, and being able to objectively look at your behavior, examine, did being a middle child, is a first immigrant, how is all of those events and layers of life and variables in life impacting me right now? And am I carrying stuff maybe that I shouldn't be carrying anymore? And I'm making it part of my story still. Yeah. Right. And so I think you probably went into your therapy experience very self-aware and willing and open and like task oriented, like, let's do this. Yeah. Not everybody does.
Yeah. I see that, because people are in therapy for years, if not decades. And I was thinking, are you making progress, the kind that you want? And I understand that if you've gone through really traumatic things in your life, that it can take a really long time to undo that damage. I understand that. I often tell people, if it took 18 years for you to develop this problem or this fear, hopefully it doesn't take you 18 years to undo it, but it will take time, not 18 minutes. Let's be realistic with our expectations. But something that Keir told me, my business coach, when I was thinking about going to a therapist, he said, if you're not willing to be honest, don't go. Just save your money. It's silly. You're just going to make them work through all this, and they already know you're lying or you're not telling the full truth, and you just will drag it out. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going of my own free will. No one's forcing me to do it. There isn't a gigantic problem I need to resolve immediately, but I just want to go to learn how to be a better, at that point, dad. I felt like I was failing my relationship with my children, and I wanted to be a better father. So that's why I went. And so that now I know what age this is, because this is like 14 years ago. No, maybe more. Maybe it's like 17 years ago, because it's been some time.
Okay.
Right? Because I can date it to like when my children, what year, how old they were at that point. Yeah.
And, I think that's commendable. And like, again, that takes self-awareness to be like, hey, I'm feeling this particular way about how I'm interacting with my children right now and with the status of our relationship.
Yeah.
How can I change it? And I think that's really vulnerable to admit that to yourself. And thank God your friend told you, like, don't waste your time. Don't go unless you're going to be super open, because there's no progress that's going to be made. And I think that if more people, especially those that are really ambitious and probably listening to your podcast, that have big hopes and big dreams that they're going after, it requires a level of vulnerability and self-awareness to be able to get there. And, in my own, they say that you end up like, I'm going to probably script this phrase, but like you end up teaching like who you were, or your target audience ends up being like who you were, something like that, where it's like, you know your process and what you went through, therefore you can help other people through it.
Yeah.
This took me years, and maybe it's a little cheesy, but I wanted to help people, right? And I was like, I love the coaching, but like, what am I coaching them on? And it took me a long time to figure out, like, what do you say, the one line marketing, deal, like your little pitch, your little elevator pitch.
Yeah.
And it's because I still was figuring out my own process, my own experience. But then eventually I came up with this acronym, and I really think that it's part of the human experience overall. And if we can walk ourselves through this, anyone listening to this can do the work themselves, right? They don't need to hire someone like me. I think it's helpful to have some type of professional outside of yourself to guide you, some type of mentor. But the first, I think, step is identifying a pattern that you're in, whatever that is, right? So P. So the acronym is PEACE. So P, I say patterns. What are they? Are you dating the same type of person? Are you coming up against the same obstacle in your business? What are the patterns in your life? And then the next layer, which is really tough for people, is ego deconstruction. So let's look at your ego. What are you attached to in your identity? And like, some people are really attached to their, label as a CEO or a founder, or like, I'm the best at this, or in my family, I have all the answers. So like, what are the layers of your ego that you're attached to? And then the A, I think once you identify patterns and you become really aware of how your ego operates in your life, we can have awareness of your core wound. So I think after those two things, deep awareness comes in, which is the A. And it's not just awareness in general, because you're developing awareness with the patterns in the ego, but the awareness of your core wound. And for anyone who's never heard of a core wound, it's a term used in psychology. There's different, people say sometimes there's 5, 8 core wounds. There's like 7 I really focus on, but some of them are like abandonment core wound. Not being good enough is a big one. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of being misunderstood, like all of those. When you can identify which one or two, because normally when I introduce them, people, they're like, oh my God, I have all of them. And I'm sure on some level we do, but there's typically 1 or 2 that are super up on the list. Like for me, unworthiness was a big one, and fear of vulnerability was a big one. And when we know how that shows up, because that's often connected to some crap in childhood that happened. Someone said something to you and you're holding on to it. That one bully said this, or your mom said that, and you're holding on to it, and you're just it's showing up in your adult life, right? When we have that awareness of like, oh my God, right now I'm feeling triggered because I'm scared that my partner is going to leave me, or my best friend is not going to, whatever, fill in the blank, right? Once we have those wounds identified, you then can move into the compassion piece, which is where the healing takes place. That's the C, the compassion. And compassion is for yourself and the inner child that is still activated in the adult, and also for the people, quote unquote, that hurt you, that caused those wounds, right? Because when we look at it from a different compassionate lens, you see that if they were really mean to you and bullied you, they probably suffered some type of trauma of their own, right? So we end up learning that most people are doing the best they can with what they know. And then I feel like once you go through all of those steps, you get your power back. So the E is for empowerment. You can now live this empowered existence because you're not giving your power away to everybody else. And I think that's like the biggest pattern I've noticed in my own journey. Once I identified my journey and I started sharing it with people, because at first it felt kind of silly. I felt a little self-conscious about it. And I was like, you know what? It works for me. I'm going to share it. And if people don't like it, they don't have to like it. But so many people are like, oh my God, now I can kind of see the chapters that I'm in or where I'm at in my journey. So it's been pretty cool to share that with people and help them realize, where am I at in that? Do I even know what patterns I'm in? Do I know how my ego shows up? And it's been really cool to give language, I guess, to those different phases.
You mentioned a handful of core wounds. I wrote down 5. Which ones am I missing? Abandonment, rejection, vulnerability, misunderstood, unworthiness. What else am I missing?
Grief. So like unprocessed grief is definitely one. And it doesn't have to just be, a lot of people hear the word grief and they think it means like the loss of a loved one. It could be an opportunity you didn't take. And you're like, damn, I should have taken that job with Chris and I didn't. Did we say betrayal?
No.
Maybe those are the last 2.
Okay. Those are good.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the list and then I have to ask you, what is your core wound?
So my 2 biggest ones were fear of vulnerability and unworthiness. Those are my biggest ones. And a little bit of betrayal, I would say, would be the third. But yeah, I know. I know. Let's go there. Let's go there. I ain't afraid to go there.
Really?
No, I'm not at all.
Okay. Well, I'm listening to this. I'm like, I don't have a fear of abandonment, rejection. I'm not afraid of being vulnerable or misunderstood, or I feel very worthy. So I don't, every once in a while I have a feeling like I should have done this instead of that, but then I get over it real quick. And I've been betrayed myself too, but I'm also over that. So I'm like,
so you're perfect.
No,
I'm just kidding. Totally no. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. I'm kidding.
You said peace. What is perfect? Like,
can we have an acronym for perfect?
Yeah.
No, but you know what, Chris, you're a product of doing the work.
Okay.
That's why you're like, these things are not easily activated in you because you've done the work. And so why I share the core wound is that a lot of people haven't done the work. And so those buttons are still activated.
Yeah, I see. And you had said something that I shared something and you said that was vulnerable, or for you to admit that I need help. I don't feel like it's vulnerable at all. So when I see like the stress that's being caused by not knowing how to parent my own children and feeling frustrated, and I can see it spilling over into my relationship with my wife. Like it's creating tension between us, and it's not even about us. It's about our child and how to deal with the child. So I'm like, I need help right now. So I'm a forever student, right? Yeah. I've mastered some things, but there are masters who are beyond me. And every time I run into a corner or a dead end or hit a stumbling block, I know a formula that works really well. I'm going to share it with our people here. Guys, take out a piece of paper. Get ready for this. This gem I'm about to drop. When you realize you have a problem, seek out the highest authority that's within your grasp and just pay them whatever they need to get paid so that you could learn from them. I've just done this consistently through my life and it's worked time and time again. If you had asked me, Chris, I noticed your teaching style is a little different. I would say, well, because the last 2 years I've spent a good deal of money to hire teaching consultants to teach me how to be a better teacher. And I'm learning different tools, and and it's because it's my aspiration to be the best teacher I can be. And there's so much more to learn. And so that's what I've been doing, but it hasn't necessarily changed my care for somebody or the sharpness of the blade. It's just, I want to try to structure the teaching in a different way. So anybody who's really good at teaching, who knows how to do it well, I want to learn from you. Yeah.
Yes. So you see, you have been doing something.
Yeah, but it's not what you think it is. That's
but it was still something.
And we're always doing something.
Which is why what I love about you.
I want to grow and learn every single day. I want to push myself physically, mentally, spiritually, all those kinds of things. I want to go way out of my comfort zone so I can find out what the edges of my world are. And I think that's the beauty of life. And I want to be able to share that experience with a lot of other people. You included, of course.
You know, Chris, I think you're able to ask for help because I don't think your ego runs your life. I think that's a big distinction. I think a lot of people unconsciously, they don't know, but maybe after listening to this, they'll know.
Yeah.
Their ego, their need to drive that car, live that house, have that title is driving the car. And therefore, if I ask for help, what are they going to say about me? Because that's ego.
Okay.
It sounds like you were like, I need help. Yo, like, I know it's important in life. My kids.
I even broadcast it. I'm like, I'm not even hiding this, you know?
That's what I'm saying. So you have a very healthy ego. Because the ego isn't bad. That's the one thing I definitely want to say is a lot of people, the ego gets a bad rep. Like, ego is the reason I did my hair this morning. Then I wanted to look nice. You know, ego is the reason that we have financial goals. Like ego, you know what I mean? Like the jacket you want to get, like that's ego. So it's okay. It keeps us, it's just, it can't drive the car, but it can be in the car. It just can't drive. So I think that's why you're so able to ask for help.
What are practical ways that a person can identify, oh, ego's driving this? What are certain telltale signs that you've seen in working with people?
Some of the biggest signs are judgment. So are you judging yourself? Are you judging others? And also judge. So whenever I say that, people are like, oh, so I'm never supposed to. Okay. If that's you, chill. Okay. There's a difference between judgment and discernment. Judgment is me evaluating you. There's often some type of ranking. I think I'm better. I think my way is right. You are wrong, right? That's judgment. Okay. Discernment is me looking at the situation and being like, is this going to be in my best interest? Okay, you know what? Chris is deciding this, this, and this. Maybe this other leader is doing it this way. You know, my values are more in line with Chris. So I'm not saying, oh, this person's a bad teacher. They're Chris is way better. That's ego. But for me to be like, you know what, I think this is in more alignment with me and would serve me better. I wish that other person, well, they can do their thing, but Chris is a better choice. So I'm going to go this way because we're in more alignment. That's discernment. You know, like there's this cheesy example I often give because this is a really hard notion for people to grasp because judgment is so deeply embedded in our brains for survival. We are constantly judging to say, is this safe? Is this not safe? Am I going to be okay? Right? Our brains are wired for that. But we also have the ability to observe and to, you know, like consciousness and notice our thoughts. So imagine I was the captain of a ship and a storm was coming and I'm like, all right, oh my God. And I panic. I'm like, everybody get inside. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. You do that. And you're like, no, wait, what if we can actually like withstand the storm? I'm like, Chris, no, this is what we're doing. The end. Okay. That's me being judgment freaking out. Ego is like, no, because this is going to look badly on me. Oh. Discernment would be, you know what? Okay, how bad is the storm? You tell me this is how bad it is. Okay. And then I look at this other person. What, supplies, tools do we have currently? Who's aboard on the ship right now? I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to think about it and be like, okay, this is, I think, the course of action we should take. So discernment is like this reflection. And I'm not, does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So I think that's the biggest thing where people kind of like, so judgment is the first thing with the ego. You can look, if you're in judgment, you're in ego. Another thing is our attachment to things like our identities. Yeah. That's a big one. And it's so weird. I feel like the human experience is this really interesting experience where we get attached because we know we are going to die one day. So we get attached to things. Nothing's forever, nothing's permanent. So we get attached. But then also that very attachment causes so much pain and suffering. You know, I think about when I was an athlete for so long, my whole life, played college for a little bit. And then when that no longer was my identity, I had a really hard time because I was so attached to like, I'm an athlete, I'm this, I'm that. And I was like, now who am I? I had like an identity crisis because of my attachment to that. That was ego.
Yeah. Okay, I want to talk about some of these things. There's some juicy tidbits here, strings I want to pull on, if you will. Let's talk about attachment, because I think attachment is the thing that prevents a lot of people from the exponential growth that they're capable of. I was having a conversation with Mo. This is before Mo and I really get to know each other really well. And he's at one of the Futur meetups in Santa Monica. And I told him like, hey, Mo, I just noticed something about you. You show up in a t-shirt, kind of like not really well put together. And you have to realize that when people see you looking like this, they're going to make assumptions about maybe you're not that thoughtful in the way that you show up in the world, that you're not showing people the respect for the situation. And he was really put off by that. He goes, Chris, I got to be me. This ain't me. And I don't want to do that. And this is how it's going to be. And we started to examine and pick that apart. And I told him, let me ask you this question. If you go to an Asian person's house, will you take off your shoes? He goes, of course I would. I said, and if you go to a business meeting with Japanese business people, would you wear a suit? He goes, yes, I would. So when is that not part of your identity? And when is it? And why would you take off your shoes? He goes, it's a sign of respect. I said, okay, so when you dress the way that you want, you're saying I'm going to disrespect the way that you want things because it's fighting against your identity. And so he's so attached to this identity of whatever clothes he's wearing that he's not willing to change to make that concession. The difference between him and Drigo at that one moment was Drigo's like, I hear you. So Drigo started dressing differently immediately. He didn't sit there to calculate all the different reasons why or why not. He just heard something. He's going to try it and see where it takes him. And he's been on that continuous experiment. Good news for both gentlemen, both Mo and Drigo, who you've seen on the channel. They're both moving into the next echelon of how they show up in the world. And I'm really happy for both of them. That's one simple example. Another example is I have a friend who's very emotional. And I said, emotions cloud judgment because that mental state that you're in will color whatever you're seeing in a very specific light. Mm-hmm. And I said that emotions are good when you're expressing things of love, admiration, or whatever it is that you're like when you connect with a real human, let all those emotions go. But when you're looking at life, oftentimes the emotional goggles that you look through skew or distort reality. But this person argued with me. Who am I without my emotions? I'm an emotional person. I'm going to live in this. And they're reacting emotionally to the comment about maybe wanting to get that distance away from that. What I understand from you in terms of discernment is our ability to float above our emotions and to observe those things, to be able to decide when and where it is most to our benefit to respond or react that way.
1,000%.
Right?
Yes, 1,000%. Because there are also emotions driving that person. Like you said, you're being reactive.
Yes.
Instead of just being like, how do I want to respond to this situation?
Right. I'll share this with people because some people are going to feel really angry right now listening to me. Like, who the heck are these two people talking about this thing? I'm going to have my emotions and that's the way it's going to be. And that's totally okay. I'm going to ask you this question, all of you. Does your state of mind, your state, affect how you see things, how you respond to things? I just want you to sit with that question. Does your state of mind affect how you see things and how you respond to things? Let's go through it. Let's say you're late for an appointment, the interview for the job of your dreams. So now you're in a panicked, anxious state. How you drive, how you grab things. And I've always noticed this. Whenever I'm anxious, I make careless mistakes. I'm like, oh, I didn't grab the right shoe. I run back and I forgot this. And I'm not in a clear state of mind. Let's put another thing. If you've been the victim or the recipient of an act of betrayal for someone that you love and have a great relationship with, if they've betrayed you, you may be in a suspicious or jealous state of mind. So that person who's wronged you or you've been wronged in the past, maybe not even that person, every time they have an interaction with someone else, you're like, oh, this must mean that. Mm-hmm. And we know this. We've done it. I've done it. I've been a jealous person before. And I've also been on the other end of people looking at me with jealous eyes. And I'm like, just relax. There's nothing here. There's no smoke. There's no fire. It's the most platonic business relationship there ever is. And so I just want you to sit with that, everybody. That your state, your mental state, your thoughts govern how you see things. And if you look through the world through those lenses, you're going to have a distorted version of reality. And I'm just trying to see things for what they are, not what I want them to be.
You said it beautifully, Chris, and we're in agreement. And I'm losing her name right now, but there's a person who studies emotions, and she was saying that essentially emotions are really just records of the past, and our brains are When I see, let's say you and I are a couple and I see you talking to this other woman and I'm like, and she's really attractive and she's really pretty. And I'm just like starting to feel jealousy. And maybe I've been cheated on in the past. You've never done that, but I've been cheated on in the past. This feeling is bringing me back. It's taking me in a time machine. And so our brains are just trying to assess, oh, this looks familiar.
Yes.
What's the most familiar example I have? This one where I got cheated on. And now I'm projecting that into my future. So there's this, one of my coaches once told me, because I used to be guilty of this, being very emotional and being very reactive. And she told me, you cannot continue to build from the past or else you will just get more of it. So she's like, you need to learn how to build from here now or in the future where everything is possible. What kind of a relationship do you want with Chris? Do you want one where you're all jealous and you guys don't trust each other and da, da, da? No. Right. But again, our brains, that's how they work. And I think that's why it's so important to become an observer and notice, okay, I'm feeling a little jealous right now. Why? And go into that and discern and reflect instead of me getting all upset at my partner and projecting the mess onto them and making them, you should have done this, you should have done that. So yeah, emotions totally, they can't drive the car.
I did a little research here. The quote comes from Dr. Joe Dispenza. Emotions are a record of the past, most commonly attributed to Dr. Joe Dispenza, who often uses this phrase to explain how our current emotions can be heavily influenced by past experiences and memories, essentially acting as a kind of record of our past life. He goes on to say something like this, that because emotions are a record of our past experiences, if you can't think greater than how you feel, this thinking-feeling loop keeps you anchored to your past and creates a constant state of being. I love this idea. I didn't know about this, but this explains a lot.
Doesn't it?
So let's sit in this, okay?
Yeah.
Everybody. So when you're behaving in a way in which you're responding to a previous trauma or slight or whatever it is you've had to deal with, a grievance, you're saying, well, you must not love me. You must not care about me, and you're betraying me. When in fact, if you just look at objectively what has happened, it's not a very strong case for the conclusion that you have. But some part of this mirrors a little bit of what you've had happen to you in the past, and you're just reliving that memory, which is really tough because then you can't have real connections with people because you're not really being present. You're not being here to the moment. You're responding to some old story, old narrative, an old wound that hasn't fully been reconciled. And that's a tough place to be in. And so now when you say, who needs this? And you say everybody, I'm like, yeah, pretty much everybody I know. Pretty much.
I say like we're really crappy time travelers. Like we only, we're imagine having a time travel machine, but you don't get to control it and it takes you back to all the crappy experiences you didn't like. Like, no, thank you. I don't want that machine. But that's how we've trained our minds, a lot of us. And we willingly let our minds take us to the past. I will share a very practical way of how I had to change my state. And when I really first did this, to tell people this stuff works. In college, in grad school, I went through a very traumatic breakup. Like I thought me and this person were going to get married. I thought this was like the one. Homie breaks up with me in an email, dodges my calls, dodges my, like everything. All of a sudden, just imagine everything's cool. And then one day it's not. And I was like, what the heck happened? This was right before my comprehensive exams, which is like what you need to get out of grad school. Okay. The timing could not be worse.
Yeah.
I had never in my life experienced depression. I, till that point, thought depression was like all in your head, quote unquote. I was like, because I was very like driven and achievement based and you just power through, mind over matter, right? This was the first time in my life where I could not get out of bed. Never experienced that before, ever. And I've had some crazy things happen in my life. That was the first time. And I remember for weeks, I was not really eating. I lost like 15 pounds and I'm already kind of a tiny person. Lost 15 pounds. I couldn't get out of bed. And every morning I would repeat the same thoughts of, oh my God, she left. What did I do wrong? She won't pick up my calls. What's the point? I'm going to fail my exams. Like just literally this loop I was in. I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't talk to anybody. Like it was in just the same tape for weeks. And then I don't even know how this happened, but maybe I picked up a book in my room or something. Oh, I think it was the Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now book I reopened. And he basically said like, just if we can change the thought we're having in the morning when your subconscious is so open in the morning and also before we go to bed, let's just see what happens. So I finally just got curious. I was like, okay, I can't live my life like this. And am I really going to let this one person destroy my whole academic career? I need to pass these exams, right? At the very least, I need to get my butt up and study. And so I started this practice of, instead of replaying all of the trauma of how the breakup went through, every morning I would do that. I would be like, wake up and be like, wait, is this real? Did that happen? Because it felt like a dream. So what I started doing was, before I even opened my eyes, because you know you're awake, I made myself say 3 things I was grateful for. I forced myself. I was like, what are you grateful for? And some days it was just like, I'm alive. I have a nice bed to sleep in. And I have a job. Yay. Like that was it. But then as I kept doing it, and I would do it before bed, and I would journal it before bed, 3 things. And I mean, there's so much research now on gratitude and how powerful it is in changing our state. It's one of the most powerful emotions to anchor you into the present moment. The most powerful is gratitude, because you can't be anywhere else when you're saying what you're grateful for. You have to be here. And so that little practice changed my state, changed my thoughts, changed how my body was feeling. I started being able to actually eat food, and then slowly started making different decisions because my emotional state was different. And so that was one of the places where I was like, oh, this actually works. And that's why I just wanted to share that with people, because it works. It's real, but you just got to try it, and you got to do it. And I think people aren't willing to try it sometimes until they're really on their knees and they've hit rock bottom, like I was.
Sometimes you need that. I think a lot of us, this is one of my theories of life. So let's see if we are in alignment here. I think we have to hit rock bottom sometimes to force us to make different decisions with our lives. Sometimes people don't get off smoking or drinking or drug abuse because they haven't hit that rock bottom. And when they finally hit that rock bottom, they have to come to terms with, I think there's only one more bottom to this, which is I no longer exist. And I want to make different decisions. And so you go the other way. There's nothing controversial about what I'm saying there. What I'm saying is, what people do is they experience some kind of setback, mental, relationship, physical, spiritual, something. They have a setback. And what they do is they get fuzzy about it. And they avoid the feeling of like how bad it feels. And so they kind of gloss over it. So they're bound to repeat this over and over again. When I have a negative emotion or a feeling about myself of not being worthy, or I'm letting my ego drive, I just stop and think, I want to sit in that pain, in that negative emotion. And in fact, I want to amplify that to its nth degree. So I create like a mini catastrophe in my mind, but it's guided, right? It's not like out of control. So I take myself to like, what is the next step, and next step? What is the bottom of this pit? Because I want to go there now. And I want to sit in that emptiness. So then I can zoom back up to where I'm really at emotionally and say, I know how this ends. Why don't I just make the decision now instead of having to go to the bottom to make that decision? And that's how my mind operates.
Exactly. And that's, I think, what we need to do, is because what you did was you just put things into perspective for yourself. Is it really worth it? Is this really the hill I want to die on? Is this emotion worth my time, my energy? And is this going to produce the outcome I actually want? No, it's not. And I'm not saying to like bypass your feelings and don't ever be angry. Or people are like, so are you saying it's not okay to feel the negative things? No, absolutely feel it. Like you just said, play it up, feel it, do it. What's that going to give you? And then let it simmer down. There's research that shows really our emotions are fleeting. They only last seconds, but what makes it last longer is the story we attach to it. Mm-hmm. That's why people end up being angry for days, or couples fight over something for days, and then they finally resolve it 3 days later.
I think there's this thing that reminds us that we're alive and that we're human, in that we want to relive that emotion over and over again, because it's just, and my wife has said this to me. I just want you to be angry for a minute, because I want to see that behind the robot, there's a human in there that cares about this kind of stuff. I say, I care about this deeply. And when I go negative, and when you see it, it will be the most horrifying thing that you see. And you do not want that at all. But if you want to, I will let the dragon out, and I'm totally in control of the dragon, but here we go. And of course I show it to her, and she then has tears of joy. I'm like, this is the strangest response I've ever seen. Me being unreasonable, irrational, emotional, angry is what you wanted to see, because you just wanted to know if I care. But I care a lot. I just choose not to express it in negative ways. And so I think for people, it's my theory there, that story of abandonment is not a good story. It's not one that lifts us up. It's definitely not one that empowers us, but just reminds us we're human. So we relive it over and over again. And I find this with my children too. So we used to sit around and tell stories about my childhood, and it was pretty rough. I'm not gonna lie, pretty rough. Stories of abandonment, people forgetting about me and just feeling like lost and alone. And my sons both are like, "Oh, Dad, what a childhood! Tell us more." Like, we love this. They're like eating popcorn in my misery.
They don't need TV. They have you.
Yeah, I'm just telling them, like, they're like, "Oh my God, how could Grandma do this to you?
Aww.
Why would she do that?" I'm like, Grandma did the best that she could with the information she had, and she just didn't know. Mm-hmm. She didn't know. Now I get to have fun telling those stories, but there wasn't fun when I was living it. But I find that my children don't want to hear stories about success and overcoming triumph. They want to hear the dark, sad stories. And I think it's because they feel it in here, and it reminds them that they're alive and Dad's a human being. He's not a robot.
Yes. I mean, I'm like your kids. Like, I love sad movies, like dramas.
What's wrong with you guys?
No, it's just it speaks to what you're saying. Yeah. Like, I want to watch, like, my wife loves comedy and stuff like that. And she's like, why do you want to watch this sad movie? Like, are you kidding me? This person's gonna, like, why are we watching this? You know, it doesn't end well. But I think there's just something like you're speaking to that's like, wow, they survived that, or wow, they didn't.
Right.
And how lucky am I?
Right.
So yeah, I think you're onto something.
There's a friend that we went on a trip with recently. This person's an intellectual, extremely like well-read, can quote different things. I'm like, oh my God, the brain on this person. They just read books for fun, like they're eating potato chips. And we were just having a conversation without the person in the room. It's just saying like, yeah, I don't think this person knows how to lie. And we're all looking at each other. And I said that. I'm like, it just doesn't feel like they could lie because it doesn't make any sense. And then we joked because the person's so robotic, it would be inefficient to tell a lie. It's like, what is the point of telling lies? You know, it's kind of like how they operate.
Yeah.
So we kind of think like that, you know, robotic people who are very intellectual or are optimized for optimized for positive outcomes. What is the point of not telling the truth? And it's hilarious. So for me, it's like, yeah, I'm kind of like a robot deliberately. And so the shock and surprise to a lot of people is when they meet me outside of the context of a teaching environment. They're like, oh my God, you smile a lot and you're a lot more charming than I thought. You're a weird mother effer. You know, you're joking around and you do goofy, weird things that only adolescents do. I'm like, yeah, because I'm human. And in the context of teaching or workshopping or doing a serious role play, where do I bring that out? You know?
Yeah, it doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit.
Why would I bring it out? It's just like would be a non sequitur. It would just be like left field, bro, you know, context, that kind of stuff. But, you know, if you're out on a fishing trip with me in a boat,
it's going to get fun.
And you're pulling your fish, you know, I'm like, okay, now bonk the fish in the head. And that's the next step. And like, no, not like that. You'll see emotion from me because in the context of the boat, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because I think, you know, when you're teaching, you're really like tunnel visioned in and you're trying to give this person as much value as possible for what they're trying to learn or where they're at, right? And so you kind of remove all the other stuff to make room for that.
Unless it's necessary.
Unless it's necessary, yeah.
Which I do as well, but there's not often times when that's appropriate.
Or is there clones of Chris? And there's teacher Chris. And then there's other Chris.
Other Chris. Well, you know, I used to teach at Art Center And it's a 14-week class for about 8 to 12 students at a time. And we'd sit in this really big room. It's a perfect room because all the walls are whiteboards and I could draw on every single wall, right? And they kind of sit in the center. And oftentimes we would put up our work, we critique. And in that moment, I'm like, you guys are a little uptight here. Why did you draw this thing? I would draw something inappropriate around there. Like, that's what it looks like to me. And then everybody's like, oh my God, did the teacher just do that? I'm like, yeah, because that's kind of what you presented to us right now. I'm just saying what everybody's thinking, but is too afraid to say. And I will do really weird, goofy things with them so that they can break out of this very tightly contained, this tight container that they put themselves in. And then it's very appropriate for me to get weird and wacky.
Absolutely. If anything, you're enhancing their learning environment because they're relaxing.
That's what I tell myself at night.
You are. We're both delusional.
Through years of trauma therapy, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe the teacher said that about my work.
No, it disarms people. And I think that's one of the things that, when I do the same things, Chris, like, I mean, come on, I'm going to not high school, I'm sorry, college students, 18, 19 years old. I'm like, let's talk about trust. Let's talk about betrayal in relationships. And they're all posturing for each other. So like I got to bring something silly, something goofy.
Yeah, of course. You have to show them that you can be this way.
Exactly. Like it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to show up imperfectly. It's okay to say the wrong thing. It's okay. So I think that's just kind of what you're doing in those moments. And you're, like you said, it's not you're not a robot, but you're picking and choosing when is it efficient and appropriate to have those versions come out.
Let's look at the 3 things you said.
Okay.
But your core wound: vulnerability, unworthiness, and betrayal. I'm trying to be mindful of time. I don't want this to be a 45-hour podcast. So which one of those things do you think would be helpful for people to understand and unpack? And we'll use you as an example here.
I feel like vulnerability is a pretty universal one that a lot of people struggle with. For me, I did not realize this, but I grew up in a household where we didn't talk about feelings. So vulnerability was not a thing. We did not do that. It was like you had to kind of fight to be heard. Okay. And as the middle child, I had to fight to be seen. Middle child-ish. I had to fight to be seen. And so while it's happening to us, when the core wound is happening, you don't know what's happening, right? And now it's only in reflection when you look back, you're like, oh yeah, I was fighting to be seen. But I really think where I started to struggle with vulnerability, it started there in my household where we didn't express feelings openly. You had to be tough. And when there was conflict, we didn't talk about it. You just assumed everybody was sorry and would behave normally the next day. But I think for me in particular, and this is for anybody who feels other, but being a queer person in the 90s and early 2000s, I felt like I was performing all the time. Right. And vulnerability is really, us being authentic, us being our true selves. I didn't feel like it could ever be my true self because I was so scared of being rejected. And that's what vulnerability is. We're hiding who we are, or we pieces of who we are to be accepted by the group. And so I did that forever. All through my teenage years, then into my early 20s. And I grew up in Orange County, which is rather conservative. And so I did not realize the posturing that became so normal and the switching, like, how we code switch with our words. Yeah. I'd code switch in other ways to blend in, and I'm like, okay, well, how can I behave to be accepted in the group? And it's not just with my sexual orientation, but other ways, like being an athlete. You had to be tough. If I was hurt, I sucked it up. Coach didn't accept that. It was the playoffs. You better, suck it up and unless something is broken, like keep going, right? So there's all these ways that we posture to be accepted as human beings. And I feel like this is why it's a core wound that's so vital. But the fear of vulnerability, I think, really stems from not being accepted in society and being othered. And there's so many other things people could talk about: race, you could talk about a disability that you have. I mean, there's so many other things. And I think that was the hardest part, just growing up and always having to hide some piece of me was the biggest wound for me. And then to get in this work where I'm like, let's talk. I have to be my authentic self. Like, I remember the first time I was teaching. I was like 23 years old teaching at the university. And I was like, do I come out to my students? Do I just wait for the topic to happen? Am I closeting myself if I do that? Am I not being authentic? It was a really weird thing to think about. And this again can be substituted for things that we share and don't share. You know, there's so many things that we don't share than disclose with people. And then when there's those like sliding door moments of, this is an opportunity where I could share something with Chris, but I'm scared he's not going to accept me if I share this. So there was always this big fear of not, but really what it comes down to for everybody is, if we don't accept those parts of us, of course we're going to fear that other people won't. But the moment I started really accepting all of my differences and being like, and if I share something with this person and they reject me, guess what? They're not for me. And 100%. Then I was okay with releasing them.
Yeah.
So it was a big lesson, but I think the vulnerability piece is when you can learn to be really comfortable with who you are, nothing really can stop you because you're not going to fear anything really.
You're breaking some stereotypes, I believe. Even though your dad is white-ish, it seems like this is a very non-Latin family. If I think of Latin families, it's like emotions and talking about this and it's all there. Like, put aside the machismo thing, because guys tend to hold back feelings for judgment or fear of judgment of being not manly enough. And I get that, but what you guys would just like sweep feelings under the rug?
Like there'd be a big fight? Oh yeah. And this is the thing, kind of weird thing of how I grew up. My parents were together, but it felt like they were divorced because my mom worked graveyard and my dad worked like 8 to 5. Okay. So it was always only one parent home. It was really interesting to grow up like that, except on the weekend, they'd both be home. But there would be these blowout fights, me and my siblings, the 3 of us, one parent trying to manage all that craziness, right? We would fight. There'd be emotion. There's definitely that
Who's
Hispanic
fighting?
Siblings, my sister and my dad and me and my
what are you
brother.
Guys fighting about?
Like dumb crap that families
tell
fight
me one
about.
thing. I don't know. I haven't been in many of those fights. So what are you guys fighting about?
Like I remember my sister was in high school and she'd fight to stay out later. Right.
Okay.
And then
curfew things.
Yeah. And then I would be like, my brother and I are 4 years apart. So if I'm like 8 years old, he's 4. I don't want anything to do with him. And I'm trying to play him. I'm like, get out of here. And we'd physically fight. Right. And my dad is just like, you guys are all getting on my last nerve, all of you.
Right. Of course.
Right. And then like other things, I remember other more serious things like fighting over money. Like there's not enough money. There's a lot of scarcity in my house. And so
who's fighting over it?
My parents or me saying like
you shouldn't spend money on this.
No, like I played sports a lot. So guess what? Sports cost money.
Right.
Sure. And my dad, I remember my dad, bless him, he's working on it still. Yeah. Okay. would be like, oh my God, this is so expensive. Like the jersey, the jersey. And I'm a kid. And I'm like, okay, but you put me in this sport.
Right. What do you want me to do?
What do you want me to do?
You get a job at 4? Okay.
Yeah. And so I just remember there's all this projecting of emotion, but we never actually apologized or talked about, hey, that wasn't right. I shouldn't have done that. It was just like, he'd buy me something and be like, here you go. Like that was his way of saying sorry.
The peace offering.
Yes. There you go.
Okay. I get it. So in many immigrant cultures, feelings are a sign of weakness. Predominantly for men, sometimes for women, as we're finding out. And this idea of you hiding who you are. When did you come out to your parents?
Not till I was like 19 or 20.
Is this like in college?
Yeah, I was already in college. Probably because I started college early. I started at 17. It was probably like my 3rd year of college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what made you decide to come out to them and how did they respond?
It was another traumatic breakup, not as traumatic as what I told you, but a bad breakup. And it would just be kind of weird. Like all of a sudden this person was around. Now they're just not around. You guys just aren't friends. A friend. Yeah.
Like, now it disappears out of your life.
Exactly. So it was kind of like weird. Like, where's so-and-so? And I would lie. And then it was giving me a lot of anxiety to just lie. And I was out with everybody else except my family. I was literally living a double life. And I remember, I'll never forget, kudos to my mom. My mom was like in the kitchen, and I just like had to pump myself up. And she already knew. Parents know, like when you're about to bring
They
something.
Suspect. They suspect.
Right?
They just don't want to have that conversation,
Yes.
but they suspect.
They're like, shit, some bomb's about to be dropped.
We know it's coming. And there's like denial.
So I came and I just said, hey, Mom, me and so-and-so broke up. And then I just started crying. And I never cried in front of my parents, ever.
Right. Because feelings are weakness.
Exactly. And so it was like all this pent up tears, right, came out. And my mom is such a G. She just took a breath and she was like, well, you know what, honey? She's an effing idiot. And I was like, yes, Mom.
She did the classic mom thing.
She did.
Right? Yeah, I get it. And she just like let the other part slip right by. It's like, yeah.
Yep. And then with my dad, we never had a conversation about it because I don't know. I'm assuming my mom told him something, but he never approached him about it. He never said anything. But my dad's always been super supportive and very liberal and very open. So I never suspected that like he would abandon me. But there's always that fear. Even me, my parents loved me. I had a very loving family. But you still wonder, is this the thing that's the exception?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I see two of these core wounds attached. Your fear of vulnerability, of revealing who you are, is connected to your fear of abandonment, because if I show up as myself, does that mean I'm no longer in your life and you'll never accept me again?
You're a pro. See?
Hey, I could do this. Now, I want to land the plane on this. You're a mindfulness communications coach. How are you going to help me to transform?
Ooh. Okay.
What is the outcome of working with you? Who do I become?
What do you get from working with me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, I would say that the biggest thing I do for people is I really help them, because we're removing old beliefs and we're removing emotional patterns. These things are invisible, right? So I help people remove that. And typically what happens, the transformation that people report, is after we remove that, they feel more, one, empowered, confident, and just really back to their authentic selves. Like they're like, I don't feel like I'm playing a part anymore, that I'm not doing things to appease people. A role. I'm not playing the role anymore. Now I get to just kind of like breathe. And so I would say the transformation, I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, is they're able to communicate authentically and really just be who they want to be without all the pressures of what's my mom going to think? What's my brother going to think? They get plugged back into themselves without all the junk that they've collected along the way.
So cheesy.
So cheesy. So cheesy.
I'm just kidding. I don't know why you always say that.
I feel like cheesy. It is cheesy. I don't know.
Well, don't say that.
Okay.
You framed it as cheesy. Now I'm thinking cheese.
Okay, no cheese.
Right? So I think, if I may use slightly different words to
Please.
describe the benefit of working with someone like you, is, have you ever felt like you've been carrying around this invisible weight all of your life? The weight of being somebody that you're not supposed to be and hiding in plain sight. So I imagine that then all of a sudden you can become unburdened, and you didn't realize this whole time that your posture's weird and you've never stood up fully straight, erect. And now, free from that burden, unencumbered by it, you're lighter. In every essence of the word, you're lighter, and you're more able to express who you are, to be more present in the moment, and to have stronger relationships with the people that you care. And this could be your staff. It could be your manager, your boss, your partner in life, or the people that you show up for to coach and to teach and to facilitate, or whatever it is that you do. Is that an okay way to say it?
That's perfect. That's actually my elevator pitch you helped me create years ago, when I said I teach people to mindfully communicate and manage their emotions so they can have deeper connections with themselves and others.
That's a perfect way to end this conversation, Melanie. I know we've done this dance for a while, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation now. Perhaps the way that the universe works, to get a little woo, I wasn't ready to have this conversation with you until this very moment in time. So we're exactly where we need to be at the moment in which we're supposed to be in it. So before we get out of here, I want to ask you, if people want to get in touch with you, where do they go?
They can go to mindless2mindful.com or they can find me on socials, Melanie Whitney, and I would love to connect with them there.